Is my connection maybe off a little bit? Yeah, sorry. All right, so you guys are good now?
We are. Thank you so much.
Sorry, is my camera blurry? Anyways, yeah, so thank you guys for having me. I'm humbled, but, hopefully may be able to learn something. So my name is Andrew Mikhail. A lot of my Egyptian friends call me Dura. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I'm actually living here now. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Um, I am a general psychiatrist, so I just graduated a couple years ago, and I work mostly outpatient. Um, I work on something called an ACT team, which generally does like house calls and deals mostly with severely ill patients like schizophrenic patients or bipolar patients. Um, and fun fact, my dad is a priest, my mom is a psychiatrist, and my brother is a psychiatrist. So I kind of got the whole mix. We got our whole church covered here. So, so yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So I was asked to give a talk about something that's very important, especially nowadays with all this chaos and craziness going on, and that's dealing with anxiety or overcoming anxiety. So I'm going to try to share here. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you guys, so is that, can you guys see that?
Yep. Looks good.
Okay. So, yeah, so just to give you, that's a little bit of my background, just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from. And, I grew up here in the States. I was born in Pittsburgh. And I know, I kind of understand, I know all about our culture and a lot of things that are now coming up, especially in recent events about certain things. Just kind of dealing with a lot of different stressors and, how do we overcome all of these different things? So this is going to be just to talk about dealing with anxiety. I'm more of a discussion type, especially because I understand this group is mostly college, or is it like college and above, for what I understand?
You have a mix, so young adults, college.
Young adults college. Okay, good. Yeah, so, I don't like to lecture. I like doing more of a discussion, but we'll kind of cover some different things, and then, if anyone wants to message me privately and I can answer questions at the end, or feel free to cut me off whenever if you have a question about something I'm talking about. But if you wanted to just message me, and we can address things, so I'll try to keep the talk part of the lecture part of it, short, and then we can maybe discuss some things later. All right, so dealing with anxiety. So before we kind of deal with anxiety, we have to understand what anxiety is. So the Webster definition of anxiety is apprehensive uneasiness or nervousness, usually over an impending or anticipated ill. And ill here is defined as like a problem. So essentially, having this uneasiness or nervousness about something that's going to happen or some kind of problem that you're dealing with or something that you're about to face. Okay, so what causes anxiety? So one of the biggest things is uncertainty. So the world that we're living in now, for example, with all this COVID and Corona scare and everything that was going on, why do you guys feel like people are so anxious? Why do you feel like people are so nervous? And I think the biggest problem is people don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's so much uncertainty, and as human beings, we like to be prepared. We like to plan. We like to not have anything that surprises us. But with all this going on in our lives, this is the first time in a long time where the church was closed down for so long. And, in that in itself scared a lot of people to understand how serious this was. And just understanding that we don't know what's going to happen and we don't know how to deal with it, that in itself is a difficult thing to manage, because it causes this kind of unsettledness or restlessness that, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen in a month, what's going to happen in a year. So that idea of uncertainty is a big factor of what causes anxiety. Of course, stress. I know a lot of you may be still in school or work. Definitely during these times, again, there's just added pressures. A lot of people are getting fired or laid off, or pressure to produce more, or just enhance their work more under certain limitations. So that that in itself causes a lot of nervousness, or just nervousness and an uneasy feeling. Fear, so fear of failure, fear of not succeeding, fear of immediate threats. Somebody that comes at you with a knife, obviously you're going to get nervous and you're going to want to run away, right? Or a fear of for my college students, the fear of not having a successful career, or not failing a class and not being able to graduate, or not being able to move on, or not being able, so that in itself causes a lot of this uneasiness or nervousness, because it's something that stresses you out to the point where it's hard to deal with. It's hard to manage. Performance, like we said, at work, there's this added pressures, school, and then phobias. So like things like public speaking, spiders, high, risk, fear of heights, all of these different things. And if you look at that picture, if you add all of these things together, you're essentially causing a ticking time bomb, right? So dealing with anxiety, dealing with stress is a very, very important tool to learn, especially as you age, because if you don't learn these tools when you're younger, it gets harder and harder as you get older. And there's going to be different stresses, different things that make you feel anxious, different things throughout your lifetime that is going to, be difficult to deal with if you don't have the proper tools of dealing with it. And you can see the laundry list of things in that picture that leads to this kind of ticking time bomb, that if you don't address it and if you don't deal with it appropriately, you're just going to explode one day. Not physically, obviously, but you're just going to explode with emotions and just unrest, a lot of restlessness. All right. So what are symptoms related to anxiety? So a lot of you probably have had these things before. Increased heart rate. Your heart feels like it's just skipping a beat, or it's racing, like you can't get it under control. Panic attacks. So a lot of people, have difficult. This is one thing that really, affects people in their ability to function, is they'll start getting multiple panic attacks throughout the day, and they're just so scared of someone seeing them, because it's not fun to be having a panic attack and someone's watching you. It's embarrassing, or it's whatever. So this is when, things can get pretty intense for somebody. So muscle tension. Muscle tension is kind of self-explanatory. You feel tight. You feel like you're kind of rigid, and you just get like almost like you're not able to relax your muscles, essentially. Butterflies in the stomach, again, this is something that I'm sure all of us have felt. Sweating, shortness of breath, nausea, lack of sleep. Lack of sleep is a big one. Lack of sleep is a big one, because what happens, people start, trying to go to bed, and they're thinking about 100 different things that they're worried about. They're worried about, how am I going to do my test tomorrow? How am I going to do in school? How am I going to, what's going to happen with my bills? What's going to happen with my finances? How am I going to afford these things when I just got fired from work? How am I going to, be able to take care of my kids? How am I, they start thinking about all these different things that causes them to have this problem with sleep, because they're not able to relax their mind. Irritability. So, again, because of this nervousness, this person becomes irritable. They're just, very easily agitated. Any little thing will just kind of throw them over the top. Racing thoughts, so that was kind of what I was mentioning before, where you're thinking of 100 different things all at once, and you're just not able to slow your thoughts down. You're not able to slow your mind down, and you're just, again, just worried about so many different things at once. Lack of concentration. So a lot of my patients come in and say, Doc, I have ADHD because, I can't concentrate. But when you realize, when you ask further and further, there's a lot of actually mental illnesses that have a problem with lack of concentration. So someone who's depressed has a lack of concentration. Someone who has ADHD has a lack of concentration. But anxiety is the biggest one, because again, when you're so worried about all these different things, your thoughts are racing, you're not sleeping well, it causes you to have this problem with being able to concentrate on certain things, or concentrate when someone's talking to you, because you're thinking about so many different things. And then the last couple of trembling and restlessness. So even people just start actually physically shaking, like they're shaking their hands, they're shaking their arms, because they're just physically not able to relax their body. Okay, so these are different symptoms related to anxiety. So then what is an actual anxiety disorder? So an anxiety disorder, and I'll kind of go through a couple of these here. An anxiety disorder is when, if you look at the bottom here, it's a fear anxiety has to be, number one, out of proportion. This is a general statement, of course. Obviously, all of these have certain criteria to be diagnosed with a disorder. But to actually have a disorder, when we call it a disorder, this has to have an impact on your life. So we're humans. We're allowed to be anxious. We're allowed to have feelings. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to laugh. You're allowed to feel a little sad sometimes when it's appropriate. When we call it a disorder is whenever it hinders your ability to function normally. What does that mean? So if I'm going to work and I'm so anxious and I'm having so many panic attacks throughout the day that I'm not able to even go to work because I'm scared of someone seeing me have a panic attack, that's considered hindering my ability to function, right? It's hindering my ability to function normally at work. And it causes, that's with any kind of mental illness. It's that big emphasis is on functionality. So anything like depression or even like psychosis, any of that stuff, if it ever affects the way I function on a day-to-day basis, that's when you might, need to consider I need a little bit of extra help. So any of these, anytime we call it a disorder, is something that's out of proportion to the situation or age inappropriate and hinders your ability to function, okay? So if you look at these different disorders, so these are if you look at the percentage next to them, this is the prevalence in the population, in the adult population. So according to the APA, which is the American Psychiatric Association, about 30% of people will have some kind of anxiety disorder in their lifetime. And it's actually the most common mental illness that's treated. But if you look at the actual disorders, for example, generalized anxiety disorder, it's actually 2% of the population. So it doesn't affect a lot of people, but it does when it is. So it's not like everybody has an anxiety disorder, because like I said, everyone's allowed to have feelings. You're allowed to have normal reactions of nervousness. But when it becomes overwhelming and becomes excessive, and becomes to the point where it's just lasting every day, all the time for like several months at a time, then we look at it as something like a disorder. So generalized anxiety disorder is probably the most common thing that you'll not most common, but the thing that you hear about the most is whenever people have excessive worry, excessive. It's just constantly for like 6 months at a time, every day, all day. They have some of those symptoms that we mentioned, the restlessness, the muscle tension, all those different things. And it's just they're not able to relax. And again, it's impacting their functioning. Specific phobias, these are the things that we've mentioned. And you can see it's actually 7 to 9%. So, those people who are scared of bugs or scared of heights or scared of flying or those are all kind of specific phobias. Agoraphobia, this is like the fear of being out in public. So a lot of, you can see 2% of the population with that. And that's just, they're not able to like go out in a public place, or they just kind of just tense up. And again, they have a lot of those anxiety symptoms that we mentioned. Panic disorders, this is where people have panic attacks all the time, and they have a fear of being seen, of having another panic attack. So they have panic attacks, more days than not, and they have a fear of actually being seen having a panic attack or having another panic attack happen. Social anxiety disorders, you guys are pretty familiar with that. Just, fear of socializing, being around people. Separation anxiety, usually this is more with kids, but this is in the adult population, about 1 to 2%. Okay, so we kind of discussed now what anxiety disorders are, and kind of the difference between what is anxiety and what's an actual disorder that requires further help. So how do we deal with it? Like, now that we know what it is, and now that we can kind of understand, what it looks like, how do we deal with this anxiety? So the first thing, obviously, we're going to talk about is, what does the Bible tell us about this? Now, we're not going to go through all of these verses. This is just for your own thing. If you wanted to take a picture of these verses, these are all verses, and this is not even all of them, but this is all verses relating to how to deal with anxiety and how to deal with fear as it relates to the Bible. And a lot of these things are very important tools that we could use anytime we're facing, a time where we're feeling nervous or we're feeling anxious or we're feeling really overwhelmed. Some verses stick out to others, and that's why I listed this is about 14 or 12 of them. Some of these verses stick out more than others, and I'll show you guys the verse that really sticks out for me. And it really does help you through a lot of these difficult times, especially when you're going through, problems at work, problems at school, just feeling overwhelmed and stressed. It's a beautiful thing to go to our Bible and go to our number one source of peace, which is Christ himself, to go to him and find his word to comfort us. And that's one thing that you find throughout the whole Bible is anytime I'm feeling a certain way about anything, I can always go back to the Bible to comfort us. And of course, this is one tool, and we'll talk about other tools, but this is a major tool because in the end, Christ himself is our source of peace. And we'll kind of go through some of those things. So I'm going to go over a couple of these, just a few of these verses that kind of stuck out to me that I like. The first one here is Isaiah 35:4. And what does it say? It says, "Say to them that are fearful of heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with a recompense. He will come and save you." Okay? So what is this verse telling us? It's saying, any one of you guys who are fearful of heart, God will come and save us. So he's telling us, be strong. And this is also, if you notice, there's verses from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And why would there be verses about anxiety unless this has been something that's been around since the beginning of time? That's why we have verses, relating back even as far as the Old Testament and in the New Testament, because it is an ongoing thing that people were always afraid about. The biggest thing about the Old Testament was the fear of death, because they didn't know when the Messiah was coming. So when we look at these verses, we have to try to relate to the verse that it tells us that we are not alone in feeling this way. This has been going on for many years and since the beginning of time. And we are not alone in feeling this way. I'm not the only one that feels this way. And I think having that idea helps us to kind of understand that, we can get through it, if we realize that we are not alone in doing it. Okay? So this one, say to them that are fearful of heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. He says vengeance, like he's coming like aggressively. And he's coming to save you because he cares about us that much, and he wants us to be at peace. Okay, Psalm 56:3. This is very simple but very powerful. Whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in you. So big thing that I notice in a lot of people who are anxious are that they don't trust in God. They don't fully trust in God. They don't fully trust in, they're not buying this whole like, okay, I got to be patient. I got to be, they want answers and they want it now. They want things to be done at a quick pace, and they want things to be answered now, or else, then they go into panic mode because they might not get the answer they want right away. So he's very clear, very simple. Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you. And it's a very simple but very powerful verse to use whenever I'm feeling that way. Because in the end, if we don't trust in him, then of course we're going to be anxious. Of course we're going to be nervous because we like to have control. You know, that's, as humans, we like to have control over our lives, and we like to have, you know, we like to drive the steering wheel. It's very hard for us to let someone else drive that steering wheel. It's very hard for us to fully trust in someone, especially when it relates to my future, or especially relates to my work or providing for my family. We have to trust in him. We have to trust in him, because if we do not trust in him, then of course we're going to live this life of fear, because what did it come back to? The uncertainty aspect. The uncertainty that I don't know what's going to happen because I don't have that answer right in front of me, and I don't have, like, I can't grasp it. But if we trust in him when we're afraid, you know, that's something I always have to remind myself. Anytime I'm feeling like, oh no, like things are going downhill, like especially during this like Corona time, I have to trust in him to know that he's doing what's best for me. Because in the end, he has brought me this far in my life, and he knows, and everything that has happened in my life till now has happened because of him. And everything that will happen in the future will happen because of him. So if I trust in him, then there's nothing to really fear, because he will guide me in the way that he wants me to go. So it's a very short verse, but a very powerful one. Okay, what's the next one here? We have 1 Peter 5:7. Casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Now it's like when I feel this verse, sorry, not feel it. When I see this verse, I feel his warmth. Like I feel like a father hugging me. You know, like when he says, cast all your care upon him, for he cares for you. It's showing like he loves us so much, and he cares for us so much, that it's like a parent when you go to your parent and you're just so like, you know, Mom, I'm like going through all this and that, and they just kind of give you a hug. That's kind of what I think about when I feel this verse. I don't know why I keep saying feel. When I read this verse, cast all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Now again, it's hard to think about these times, think about this when you're in the middle of a stressor, or you're in the middle of the thing, but it's good to take time out of that, you know, stress or whatever's causing that stress, to take a break, put it aside, and just go to some of these verses, so that you can remind yourself that Christ is with us, and he cares for us, and he loves us, and we have to put our trust in him because he cares for us. We cast our care upon him because he cares for us. So it's very important for us to consider that when we're going through a difficult time. And this is obviously a very famous verse. These verses got me through a lot in my life, and a lot, especially going through college, because, you know, anytime I started worrying about something, anytime I started just freaking out, or like, oh my God, I'm not doing good in this test, or not in this class, whatever, I come back to this verse, and it just, you know, put things in perspective. Now, we've all probably read this, but I'm going to read it again. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Now, he lays it out very clear here. He lays it out very clear. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. So everything we do, if we by prayer and supplication, he knows, and he is the peace of God. He knows, he, you know, it says here, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds. Okay? So his knowledge surpasses all of our understanding. So everything that he knows about us surpasses everything that we think we know about ourselves. So having that idea that his knowledge surpasses ours, and he is the ultimate, he is the ultimate King of peace, then he will guard our hearts and minds through him. So it's a very beautiful and powerful, you know, couple of verses here, because he lays it out very simple. And this got me through a lot of, you know, difficult times. Okay. Now, you know, we have the Bible verses. We tried these Bible verses, and sometimes when we're in this very extreme state of anxiety and stress and all these things, it's hard for us to kind of, go to that. So again, these are different tools. This is one tool, and it's a very powerful tool. But there's other things that we can do. Okay, so what are some other things? So having a spiritual guide. So you guys have probably heard the verse in James. If two are better than one, for if one falls, the other can pick him up. But if one doesn't have anyone to pick him up, then he falls and doesn't have anyone. Okay, I know I kind of paraphrased that, but having a spiritual guide or a spiritual a friend is a very, very important thing, especially when dealing with different difficulties in your life. This could be a father of confession. This could be a church servant. This can be a best friend. This can be somebody that you can consistently rely on to be able to be vulnerable in front of, and so that they can help you in a time of need, and help you in dealing with the difficulties that you're going through. Deep breathing, it's some people make fun of this and they joke about it, but it's actually a very, very helpful tool, especially with like someone who's having a panic attack. So what happens when someone's having a panic attack or when someone's feeling anxious? They start hyperventilating, they start sweating, they start having their heart racing. So what does deep breathing do? It kind of just slows them down, slows their breathing down, slows their mind down, slows their, heart down. So what do we tell people to do? We tell them to take 10 full breaths. So I want everyone to try it with me. Take one through the nose and out through the mouth. All right? Right, so that's one full breath. So doing that 10 times, anytime you're feeling, and I can't see you guys, so I don't know if you really did, but just trying to make this interactive. So anytime you're feeling really overwhelmed or in the heat of the moment and you're just having that difficulty, doing 10 full breaths into your nose, out through the mouth, like I just demonstrated, helps a lot, helps tremendously. And even if you're not feeling overwhelmed and you just kind of do it throughout the day, I always tell my patients, your day kind of goes up and down, right? You don't want to pass this threshold of I'm going to get anxious and I'm going to have, severe anxiety and symptoms. So I tell people, do it throughout the day. Do it like in the morning when you wake up, do it in the middle of the day, and do it in, maybe like 3-4 times a day. And just do like a breathing exercise where you have 10 full breaths, where it just really slows you down, slows your breathing down, slows your heart down, and really relaxes you. And closing your eyes also helps with that. The next thing we have is mindfulness activities. Mindfulness activities is, if anyone has ever heard of them, there's a lot of different things. If you literally just Google, and I have a link at the end of the PowerPoint, but if you Google mindfulness activities, essentially what it is it's slowing your brain down. It's slowing your thoughts down, so you're only focusing on specific things. So one particular mindfulness activity people usually do is they'll take like, and you can do this with a group of people or do it by yourself, or there's like things that you can click on, there's links you can click on, and they kind of explain the instructions for you, and you kind of work through it. But you'll eat like a raisin, and then you'll close your eyes, and you're focusing only on the raisin, and then you're focusing on your breathing, and then you're focusing on, and they kind of go through a bunch of different instructions, and you're basically just slowing your mind down from all these racing thoughts and all these things that you're thinking about, and you're focusing on one thing, so the overall calms the rest of that down, if that makes sense. So when I'm focusing on one thing, I think about that one thing, then I don't have to think about all the racing things that are worrying me. So that's essentially what mindfulness is. Exercise is a big thing. Exercise, yoga. Exercise is a very important thing for your mental health, and that's for depression, for anxiety, for everything. It actually stimulates neurochemicals in your brain, so that you guys have probably heard of endorphins and things like that. So exercise in itself helps in giving you that kind of good feeling in your brain, so that it kind of releases some of this tension and some of this stress. So exercise and yoga are very, very important. Some studies actually show, exercise being almost just as effective as medications. eating a healthy diet, this is very important. Just, eating healthy, I know a lot of people when we're feeling anxious or we're feeling depressed, we like to, drown our pain in food and just eating, a bunch of whatever, ice cream or anything. But eating a healthy diet in itself makes you feel good. Again, it causes different chemicals in your brain to give you good feelings. So just eating a healthy diet is very important for that. So some other more, maybe more intensive things are therapies and medications. We'll get to that in a second. But just doing even enjoyable activities. Some of these things sound very silly, like coloring, but I bet you a lot of you probably haven't even colored in a long time. But doing something like a mind-numbing activity where you don't have to think, you're just coloring, it really helps in dealing with, someone who's feeling anxious or, feeling really overwhelmed. Because again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to slow you down. We're trying to slow your thoughts down. We're trying to slow your mind down. And doing something like that distracts you and kind of just, it gets you to this, slow your body down. Music, again, that's a very powerful thing that works for a lot of people because what are you doing? You're focusing on the lyrics of the music and the rhythm of the music, so you're not thinking about all the different anxieties and worries that you have. Puzzles, so a lot of people, again, when was the last time you did a puzzle? But it actually really helps a lot of people just doing like even word searches or crossword puzzles or actual physical puzzles. And then we get into more, if all of these things are really not helping you or really not working for you, we get into more serious things like therapies. So there's something called cognitive behavioral therapy, and what that is essentially, you get into this thought pattern of like, you kind of write down your thoughts, and then you kind of make a little schema, and you say, okay, at what point did I start getting super anxious or super nervous, and how can I next time avoid getting to that step? So things like that, and it's not as simple as that. I'm trying to simplify it for you, but it's a very, again, something you can easily Google, and I have a link at the end for that. But it's something that's a very, very useful, especially if it gets too overwhelming and none of these other tools are helping you. And psychodynamic therapy, that's kind of your basic talk therapy as you see in the picture here. That's more of like a weekly thing with a therapist or counselor or school counselor, whatever you guys have. And that's just something, again, it's more of like a talk therapy, just helping, and they usually will give you things to help get to the bottom line of why you're feeling anxious and trying to help you through that. Meditation is a very, powerful thing as well. Similar to kind of like mindfulness and just yoga. And then, if, all these things, if they don't work, then there is medications that are very useful in helping to treat anxiety disorders. And most of the time, we use medications for things that are severe, severe anxiety disorders. And those are the things that we mentioned, earlier when we were talking about the anxiety disorders. So the biggest question we always get, is it a sin to take medications, especially, in our church, or, are we saying that, taking this medication is me turning my back on God? No, and it's very clear here if you read Sirach 38. He says, honor the physician because of necessity and because the Most High created him. For all healing is from God, and so he will receive gifts from the King. The Most High has created medicines from the earth, and a prudent man will not abhor them. By these things he will cure or mitigate their suffering, and the pharmacist will make soothing, this term is druggist or pharmacist, whatever, will make soothing ointments, and he will form healing medicines, and there will be no end to his works. So it's very clear here about the idea of using medications to help people who are suffering. Because, and these people suffer, and I know a big thing that people get scared about is, well, once we get into the idea of taking medications, like, is my personal life with God not at where it's supposed to be? And yes, that may be part of it. But again, when we look at things from a standpoint of, these disorders, we look at the biopsychosocial spiritual, we look at all of these different, it's the biopsychosocial spiritual model, right? So biological meaning that there's different problems biologically that can cause these disorders, or depressions, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever. That's the biological part. So that's the things that medications may help with. Then we have the social part. That's the social aspect of things. So, socializing with other people. Then we have the psychological part, which is the therapy aspect of things. And then we have the spiritual part, which is a very, powerful tool in helping our overall mental health. So when I'm treating patients, I tell them, medication is not going to just cure all your problems. You have to look at all the other aspects of your life. It's your physical health, your spiritual health, your psychological health. You have to look at all of these different aspects of your life, because in the end, medication is simply something to help as like a crutch, and people do suffer a lot. Medications help a lot of people, but it's also not the only thing. In addition to all these other aspects of the model, you can really, kind of treat it from different angles so that your overall mental health will improve. Because sometimes medications can only do so much, and you have to work on other aspects of their life. And it's always a big question that comes up, and a question I always get asked, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Hello?
Yeah, we lost you there for a second.
Are we?
I think you just need to share your screen again.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. Well, good thing I was kind of getting to the end anyways. And I know this is a big thing that people struggle with, but with the right help and the right, right education and the right teachings, it's something that we can work on and help to get some of these people help, because there's so many Coptic people that suffer for so long, and finally, after 5-10 years, when they just can't do it anymore, they'll finally, come to seek professional help. And it's our job to kind of focus and educate and work together so that we can get people the appropriate help, because people need spiritual help. They go to their father confession, they go to the priest. They need spiritual guidance. The church is a hospital. It's made for those people. But it's also okay to get professional help when it's needed. Yeah, so just to kind of summarize, so I can leave some time for questions. Anxiety is something that, anxiety is something, oh, sorry, there's someone trying to ask a question. I'm summarized, and then I'm done, and then we can kind of go to questions. Anxiety is something that affects the majority of adults at some point of their life, and it's a normal thing that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Everyone at some point has some kind of feelings of anxiety, and sometimes it can be a positive thing. It can motivate you to study for a test so you do well on it. It can motivate you, like, hey, there's a car coming. I'm getting nervous. Okay, I need to get out of the way of the car coming. So there is positive aspects of anxiety as well. But it's important for us to be mindful of symptoms of anxiety and when things are getting bad enough that I need to address it. Because if I don't address it, then it comes out in other ways later on in life. And there's many different tools that we have to overcome anxiety. And the biggest one, like I said, the Bible really, the verses that I mentioned really got me through a lot of difficult times. Because in the end, Christ himself is the source of peace, and he will ultimately give us that, endless peace. But sometimes we need other tools to help us, especially when we're in different states of mind where sometimes we need a little bit of extra help. And, don't be afraid to ask for help, especially, when you're really getting to a point where it's affecting your daily life. You're not able to function. You're not able to, you're not able to you know, move on in life because you suffer every day because you're just not able to really get a hold of things. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And like I said, if you go to a therapist, you go to a psychiatrist, you're not considered crazy. No one's going to bite you. I promise I've never bit anybody. But, it's okay to try to go and search and seek out help when you need it. With the guidance of a spiritual guide or a spiritual, presence to kind of help you through these difficult times as well. These are just some resources. If you guys want to copy or paste or whatever, these are just different things that help with like the mindfulness activities and guided audio recordings, things that are just helpful in terms of using as tools whenever someone's feeling really anxious. These are some articles, and obviously psychiatry.org has a bunch of different information for a lot of people. And that's it. This is my email if you guys have any questions about anything, or you could always email me if you need to. And that was all I had, guys. I'm not sure. Someone raised their hand. I don't know if that was on accident or
Yeah,
what.
that was me. Sorry. Hi, my name is Sarah. I just wanted to say thank you for your lesson. I really appreciated it. It was really good.
Yeah.
And I had a
Thanks for
question.
having
It's
me.
kind of like a two-part question.
Yeah.
Um, so when you look at the DSM-5 of anxiety, it's kind
Mhm.
of really similar to depression, especially if you're looking at general anxiety disorder, or if
Mhm.
you're looking at like a panic disorder or something like that. It usually doesn't exist by itself, right? Um, It usually exists with depression, bipolar, PTSD, something like that. And then I guess the second question is,
What
so,
was the question in that?
uh, yeah, I just realized that I didn't really ask the question. The question is like,
So to clarify, you're basically saying there's a high comorbidity with a lot of these other, you know,
yes,
sometimes
yes,
it is by itself, but a lot of times it can be with these other diagnoses is what you're saying.
yes.
Okay.
So it kind of just like leads into like, so when we talk about mindfulness and we talk about yoga and stuff like that, there's a lot of psychosomatic issues that we're dealing with. So like, a person has a panic attack, their chest is hurting really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also going to want to be fatigued, or neurasthenia and things like that is going to happen where you're fatigued and weak and things like that. So you're not going to want to be mindful. You're not going to want to have, you know, yoga or something like that. And even when you do, sometimes it doesn't, that elephant feeling of like an elephant sitting on your chest, it doesn't always
Yeah.
help that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a comorbidity like that and you have those psychosomatic feelings,
Mm-hmm.
how are you supposed to get over that? I guess that's kind of my question.
Well, so those tools that I mentioned are mostly someone with mild anxiety. So again, those are tools. That's kind of how I went down I went down the list of these are things that you try in the beginning, and it's mostly for someone who might have mild anxiety. Now, if you're talking about someone who has severe depression, then it's going to be hard to do that without, actually going through therapy and getting medications. It just depends on how severe you're talking about. So the tools that I'm mentioning are mostly for someone who has mild anxiety symptoms, but not necessarily a disorder, if that makes sense. Now, if they have a disorder, we still recommend those things in addition to therapy, in addition to medications. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's not, so if I have someone who has severe depression, severe anxiety, like as an anxiety disorder, like an actual disorder, they're not able to function. It goes back to the functionality aspect. Now, someone who has an actual disorder and they're not able to function, like they're missing work, they're staying in bed for weeks, they're just having panic attacks on a daily basis, then yeah, like you said, that stuff is not going to help if they're not able to, if they feel like they have that elephant on top of them or that feeling of like they can't breathe kind of thing. So the medication kind of helps to get them to a point where they can do some of those things. And that's why, I talk about the biopsychosocial spiritual model idea, because you need to try to treat the biological part so that, and that will go so far, and then you can do some of the other aspects of, the yoga, the exercise, the different things that works for you. And some of the stuff doesn't work for everybody. You have to find what works for you in that time. But it's also important to, self-care is the biggest thing, you know, to do when you're feeling these sorts of ways, and making sure you don't ever get past that threshold of I'm spiraling out of control. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Now I'm just
What?
thinking about like other things like behavioral therapy versus cognitive therapy, and then behavior cognitive therapy. So now I'm just thinking like which option would be the best.
Yeah.
Um,
Cognitive behavior. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a very it's a very good
inclusive.
treatment for anxiety disorders. And if you look it up, like I said, it's the cognitive aspect is like the thoughts that I'm having to make me get to this anxious point. Like, for example, if I'm having a panic attack, okay, what are my thoughts? Sometimes they can happen spontaneously also, but sometimes they happen, they're exacerbated by a thought. So what they do is they have you, the cognitive aspect is I write down all these thoughts of how I got to that point before I got to the panic attack. And then the behavior aspect is, okay, what can I do to modify, you know, that thought or modify my behavior so that I don't get to that threshold of panic attack kind of thing. And it's more complicated than that. I'm just trying to simplify it, but it's a very good treatment for it. And again, sometimes you need a combination of everything. It's not just one thing that's going to cure it all.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. And if you guys don't want to say things out loud, you can also private message me and I can just address it too. Or if there's no questions, that's okay too. Okay, so I got a question about what steps can the church take to help take away the stigma around mental health, especially to foster channels for members to seek help. So, you know, that's a very, very common question. I was gonna say it in my PowerPoint, but I figured someone was gonna ask anyways. The biggest thing is education and having talks like this, and it does happen. It has to happen from the top bottom. So educating priests, educating servants, and I think there's a lot more of that happening now. There's a lot more of that happening now, especially obviously with some recent events and things like that. And these things are being addressed in clergy meetings, and they are trying to work on these things. I know CMANA, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of CMANA. It's Coptic Medical Association North America. We actually had a mental health symposium back in March. It was the first one we did. So, you know, the lectures are online, and we invited priests and things like that. But it really goes back to educating and making it a normal thing to talk about, and not, you know, skipping around the idea, because most of the time people are scared because what do we hear from our you know, people around us. You know, the first thing an uncle tells me, not to say an uncle, but the first thing someone will tell me is like Zayn Meganin, or like, you know, we can't be talking like that, especially because, you know, I'll give an example. There was a guy one time, you know, talking kind of like, you know, the normal, like, joking around about it, when he didn't realize the kid next to him was seeing a psychiatrist and, you know, had a suicide attempt a couple of months prior to it, Egyptian, you know, Coptic kid. And it's sad because you made that person feel even more embarrassed about his problems, because we have this idea that, you know, like, we're just going to, you know, it doesn't happen to Coptic people. And I'll tell you firsthand, nothing is immune from anybody. There's Coptic people who are schizophrenic. There's Coptic people who are bipolar. There's Coptic people with all different types of mental illnesses. And we are protected by our church and our faith. Of course, church is a very protective factor in general, but we are not immune to it. And educating people, educating servants, having these kind of talks, having talks with our clergy, with, you know, making it something that's easy to talk about, normal to talk about, comfortable to talk about, not making fun of it, you know, not making fun of the idea of people going to psychiatrists, not, again, because you never know. You'd be so surprised that the person next to you is probably on an antidepressant or on some kind of medication. I've seen it so many times where, and people don't know because they don't think that stuff happens, or they don't think, and it's something that we are working on, and it's getting better. And as part of the CMANA platform, we are trying to educate and do more of these kind of symposiums eventually, so that we can create a more comfortable and feasible environment for talking about it. So mostly just education. That's the biggest thing. Someone was asking, at what point do you suggest someone should seek professional help? It's never too early to seek professional help. I guess that's the quick answer. It's never too early. If you feel like you're debating it, then you probably need it. If you feel like maybe it's time to go see somebody, then most likely you need the help. Now, again, when you might need something like medications, that's when, again, it goes back to the functionality of this person's life. Am I doing something? Am I able to go to work on a regular basis? Am I able to go to school? Am I like slowly isolating myself? Am I struggling so much that I'm not able to like finish work? I'm not able to finish studying. I'm failing in classes. It's at that point, that's when you probably need to start actually getting you probably need to get some professional help in terms of maybe even medications. But it's never too early to seek professional help, even if you're considering it. It's not going to hurt you to just talk to somebody, even if it's a school counselor, if it's a servant, whatever, somebody that you can trust. It's never too late. It's never too early to just talk to somebody about something, because like I said, there's people that wait 5-10 years and they've been suffering all the time, and it only gets worse. And they just, because they're so scared to talk to somebody, and they didn't, they don't want to be considered quote unquote crazy or quote unquote. And the worst part is the majority of people who see a psychiatrist do not have schizophrenia or psychosis. Like it's a very rare thing. And the majority of people have anxiety and depression. It's not a crazy thing. It's just that's how they, that's just what happened to them. So it's never too early. If you ever if you're on the fence, then it's probably you need to go get help, because you're pretty much already there. If that answers that.
Andrew, do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Okay.
What church are you guys from, by the way? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Which church are you guys from?
St. Mary.
Oh, St. Mary, yeah. St. Mary, oh, okay.
Hollyville, yeah.
Abuna Joaquim?
I'm sorry?
Abuna Yunan, no?
No, Abuna Samuel Bochum.
Okay, sorry. Sidetrack. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I have a couple of questions first.
Yeah.
Do we consider anxiety to be a sin, that we're not trusting God, so we're committing some kind of sin?
The quick answer, no. No. Anxiety, if it was a sin, then it wouldn't have been addressed so many times in the Bible. Like, it's something that happens. Are you talking about anxiety or an anxiety disorder? Like, are you talking about just normal anxiety?
Not the disorder, but just as anxiety, not trusting God, as the mild way that you were describing.
Right. Yeah. So it's not considered a sin. It's just, again, it's a human reaction. Is it a sin for me to laugh? Is it a sin for me to cry? Is it a sin for me to be any kind of human emotion? Is that a sin?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that, if you consider, even if you look at different aspects of all of the Bible, if you look all throughout the Old Testament, everyone had this problem of anxiety, or everyone had this problem of fear. Does it mean that they were sinning? It was just the difficulty of understanding that, of course, if we had this ultimate relationship with God, but even people who have the ultimate relationship with God still can get these human emotions. So personally, I don't feel like it is a sin to have an emotion, a human response. Because even, like, was it a sin when Jesus wept? Why was he crying? Like, so is it, so you can't, if you're going to say one thing is a sin, then you have to call all of the emotions kind of a sin. You know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. So third question, you brought up a lot of good physical strategies in dealing with anxiety, whether it's the breathing or refocusing your attention and so forth. And I appreciate all the verses that you shared. What are some spiritual strategies that a person can take, whether, I don't know if it's like reading the Agbeya, or how do you do quiet time, some spiritual techniques that you can do besides saying, here, let me read some verses. What are some practices you do or that you could suggest?
Yeah, so of course, having your quiet time, that, again, I couldn't go into all. I wanted to cover some things of both. But of course, having your quiet time with God on a daily basis, me personally, starting my day with prayer. Starting my day with prayer, it kind of just opens my life to light. Like when I'm going on my way to work or whatever, I start my day with a prayer, so that it kind of just gets me into this comfortable relationship that I have with Christ, so that I know that he's going to be with me, and I'm thinking about him. I'm starting my day thinking about him on my mind, so that I can prepare for the day, and then even on my way back from work, I'm decompressing. I'm kind of in a different, I'm praying, and I'm, thank you God for, just constant prayer throughout the day. And having that alone time with Christ, having that alone time when you need to be able to understand yourself, that when you're in a situation, you need to be able to escape. You need to be able to escape, and oh, sorry. 1 second. You need to be able to escape and to take yourself out of that situation and put yourself into, and sometimes you might be so overwhelmed that you can't do that, that personal time, because you're just thinking about so many things. All right. Well,
I'm sorry. I think
is it
we
me?
lost.
Is it me? Maybe
Yeah.
it's me.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part, what you were saying?
So having that alone time, and having, but sometimes when you're having that alone time, you're still stuck in your thoughts. So having the Agbeya as like a controlled prayer, as something that you can just read, and you don't have to think about it, you can just read it, again, is a good way of kind of slowing down your thoughts instead of slowing down your mind. Again, listening, something for me, for example, and again, this is personal, but when I would be thinking about a lot of different things, I would sing a hymn. Like I would sing a hymn for because when you're singing a hymn, what are you doing? You're focusing on that hymn and singing the words of that hymn and the melody of the hymn, that you're not thinking about the other things. So like, for example, if I'm having trouble sleeping, I'll start singing a hymn in my mind, and then it actually will calm me down, because I'm thinking only about that hymn. Or if you're a song that you like. So those are all very good tools of, from the spiritual aspect of things. Singing like a hymn, singing like a spiritual song, taking yourself out of the stressful situation. And that's why I was mentioning having a spiritual guide, having a spiritual servant who can also guide you through those times as well, from the spiritual aspect of things. But me personally, the biggest help for me, every time I don't start my day with prayer, I'm always feeling like my mind is all over the place. So starting the day with prayer is so powerful for me, and ending it with prayer, because I'm starting my day with Christ and ending it with Christ, so that I'm not getting distracted by the worldly things of my job, my work, my life, so that I'm always beginning and ending my day with Christ.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for giving us all this information. It's really nice. I have a question as well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know why it's okay. My question is, what do you recommend to do with regards to helping somebody that may be in denial or not willing to admit that they're in the strong or a high stage of anxiety or depression?
Um,
Like the
the
ways.
biggest thing, the biggest thing is engagement. You know, some of my patients, so I work with very complex patients because they just have no insight into their illnesses. They're schizophrenic and bipolar patients. And sometimes it takes them almost a year to finally agree to take a medication. And I just work on my relationship with them, taking them out to eat, like engaging. My job is a little different. We work in the community, but just like building that relationship with them, because they need to feel comfortable. And most people are not comfortable going to see a psychiatrist. So if it's someone from church, getting a church servant involved who they have a close relationship with and not pushing it. Most of the time people are scared. You see a psychiatrist, they're going to push medications on you. They're going to, think you're crazy, blah, blah, blah. Don't push it. Always just try to slowly approach the situation. Of course, if it's a life or death situation, if they're suicidal, if they're, really thinking about ending it, then of course you have to really, nip that in the butt right away. But if it's someone that's just really struggling, but they're just scared to kind of approach somebody, getting a servant, getting a father confession, someone that they have a personal and close relationship with, and working with them slowly, not pushing them, give it a couple weeks, a few weeks, a month, because a lot of times the parents don't want their kid to go see somebody because, again, of the stigma of the culture. So if you get a church servant, if you get a priest, they're more likely to kind of be open to that idea, especially if it's coming maybe from the servant or the priest. And again, it's something that's done over a long period of time. After the person builds, after you build that trust with them, and you make it okay for them to talk to somebody. You have to make it a very comfortable environment for them to be willing to even try it. Sometimes if they have someone from the church, and there's a lot of psychiatrists in the area. I actually have a friend that just moved to Houston who's a psychiatrist, a Coptic person. So sometimes having that bridge of talking to somebody who's in the Coptic community can sometimes help to bridge that gap of, getting them the professional help they need. But sometimes it does take some time because, again, it's overcoming the stigma with the parents and with the culture itself. But just making it something, feasible for them and easygoing and not forcing or pushing. Because the more you push, the more they'll, push back and go and push, further away.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions? I left my email too if you guys wanted to reach out by email or anything. Please feel free. I hope this was helpful. I hope I, addressed things that you wanted me to address.
Can I ask one more question, Andrew?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, does anxiety also come from that if we're, the church has things set in place, like the sacraments of confession and repentance and the communion and so forth. But if we're not taking advantage of those, if we're not confessing, if we're not repenting, is that something that's adding to our anxiety, or is that something separate from anxiety?
Of course, yeah, of course that will add to the anxiety. Yeah, so that, again, that's the spiritual aspect of things, and that's something that
Hello? I can't hear you. Hello?
We can see you, we can't hear you, Andrew.
I think you're muted.
Oh, we still can't hear him.
I'll try texting him to see what happened.
Thank you, sir. Well, while Andrew fixes his audio, if you guys are uncomfortable asking questions through the phone or through voice, there is a chat box down there where you can send your questions either directly to Andrew or to the group if you choose that option.
He said he's talking, but I don't
Yeah,
think any of us heard him.
Yeah, I could see him talking, but maybe he's disconnected and reconnecting.
Yeah, I told him to hang up and log back on.
So I think I just want to share something while Andrew's logging back
Is
on.
this working now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yes, Andrew.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. I think that's my connection.
So
Yeah, your
just to
question was
rephrase-
about, I heard your question, it was about, can that, of course that can lead to anxiety. So I think your question was like, if you're not confessing, if you're not repenting, if you're not using those tools, does it, yeah, of course, and that's a spiritual aspect of the biopsychosocial model, right? So that's a spiritual aspect of it, and that's something that you need to address, and that's through your spiritual father, your spiritual guide, someone who's helping you through those difficult things. Because it's not just, again, there's so many aspects of your mental health that we try to address, and every one of these aspects can, lead to increasing anxiety. So if I'm not exercising, if I'm eating bad, if I'm drinking a lot of caffeine, if I'm not socializing, if I'm all of these different aspects besides the biological aspect can all worsen anxiety. So
Right.
definitely not having that spiritual part of your life, and again, not having that spiritual relationship with God definitely can worsen your anxiety, especially if you try to do things on your own without trusting in Him. And that's kind of why I was emphasizing that one verse, it comes down to the matter of trusting in Him. And sometimes because of our weak faith, we can't trust in Him fully, and that in itself causes anxiety because so many things are uncertain about our lives, and so many things are not going the way we want it to go because we can't let go of that control, and we can't trust in Him fully. And that definitely can lead to anxiety. And you address that through your spiritual guide and your spiritual father. But we try to address everything, not just one thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just find that a lot of people feel that they don't need to confess. It's not important for them to put themselves in front of or sharing it in front of somebody else. They'll confess directly to God. And I was just wanting to know the implications of how that affects anxiety. So, yeah.
So again, confession is one of those things that it's difficult for a lot of people because it's difficult for them to express these sins through a vessel, And trust me, I know I used to confess to my dad till I was like a teenager, and just confessing to him and saying like, Dad, I stole something from your drawer the other day, but what's funny? What's funny is I was never punished for anything that I was confessing, because in that instance, he is not my father. In the sense of he's my, you know what I'm saying, but basically, like, he's my vessel through God. Like, he's my vessel to confessing my to God, and he's given me the absolution. And I don't know about you guys, but every time I confess, I feel this burden lifted off of me. Like, I feel like, because that's essentially what's the Holy Spirit inside of us. It's that guilt that we feel when we're doing something wrong. And it's kind of, I know it's maybe not everyone feels that way, but for me personally, it's kind of when I'm confessing it and I'm like kind of just laying it out, because in the end, God knows, what we do and what we don't do. And that's why, when he's giving the absolution, he says, forgive him the sins which he's, knowingly, unknowingly, secretly or openly, whatever. So it's not that, hello?
Nope, we lost him again.
It's definitely a me problem. It's definitely
It's okay.
definitely a me problem.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Thank you very much for that. And because I think we dismiss it very easily and not wanting to be put into that vulnerable state. So.
And it's not easy to be put in that vulnerable state because you're putting yourself at a very low state, in a very vulnerable state, that it's not easy to stand in front of somebody and admit to these things openly. It's not easy to do that.
Right.
It's not easy to do that, but at the end, if you don't, then it just kind of sits there. And even if you try to confess it in front of God, it's always going to be constantly on your mind.
Mm-hmm.
We can forgive, we can always, sins are always, it's supposed to leave our minds once we confess, and it's supposed to kind of, but sometimes you still have the memory of the sin. And sometimes if you don't have that kind of physical release where you're just saying it out loud and getting it off your chest, and having that absolution, you're kind of holding it into yourself, and you're trying to work through this repentance on your own, which is sometimes can be difficult.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
But that's why it's important to have the spiritual guide, not just using your father confession for confession, but as a spiritual guide on your spiritual life, having that church servant, because they're going to help you with that spiritual aspect of the model. Now, they may not be able to help you with every part of the model, but they can help you with the spiritual aspect of the model because that's their role. Their role is to help you with your spiritual life. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. And if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to email me or, whatever you guys need before I get cut off again, because most likely I will get cut off again. But I hope this was helpful, and thank you guys for having me. And, I hope you guys all stay safe with this corona out of, and, take care of yourselves.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We really appreciate you taking the time and giving this lesson. I think it's so important. I feel like at one point or another, we've all dealt with some type of anxiety. I myself, I can share a little bit of personal information. Andrew Edward, you'd mentioned before that what if you know somebody that's maybe in denial, to get them help. You guys hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why I hear an echo, but yeah, so I was that person that was in denial, but it took myself to realize I was in denial and to get help on my own. I had friends telling me, family, everybody at this in my life, I was sleeping 3 hours a night. So right then and there, I would wake up in the morning and I'm exhausted. So I'm already getting in my car driving, I'm not safe because I can easily fall asleep on the wheel. Going to work, going to school, I'm not focused because I'm tired. I'm drinking so much caffeine because I need to wake up because I'm tired, because I didn't sleep, because I was having these thoughts at night, not knowing, what the next day would bring, or, not knowing how I'm gonna do on that exam, or if I'm gonna get that job or whatever. So it took me to realize that I needed to seek help. And this was like years later. And then finally, when I did, I was embarrassed to tell my parents, my family, my church friends, just because of the stigma and everything, like you don't need to see anybody, you're fine. You have God, you have parents, you woke up this morning. And yes, I was thankful for all of that. But sometimes it's not enough when you don't feel good on the inside and you are having anxieties. Maybe my faith in Christ wasn't as strong. And it's not until I seeked out help and saw a therapist, and I was going twice a week for about 1.5 years consistently, and doing the CBT treatments and all of these, you know, different strategies that got me throughout my week, and having a spiritual guidance as well. I think all of those combined, and finding a hobby, you know, something to do and to keep my mind off of it. Whether it be like baking, cooking, creating something new, coloring I've done, all of that. And I've noticed, I looked back at my life a 1.5 years later, and I was like, wow, like so much has changed. And that was literally just because I realized myself, I needed to seek out help. And nobody in the world, everybody was trying to tell me, everybody was telling me. And I was just like, no, I don't need it. I was the one in denial. So I think sometimes we want to help people, but we don't know what else to do, and we kind of just have to step back and say, hey, God is gonna take care of them. And when it's their turn to seek out help, they're gonna do it on their own. And in their heart, they're gonna be ready and committed. Because when I left the therapy session, I took away what she would tell me. She said, hey, this week I want you to practice this, this, and that. And I would say, okay, the next 4 or 5 days, I would practice what she told me. So I was involved, and I was like participating in all the activities. So I think that was super helpful. So I'm just sharing with you guys because, you know, if anybody does feel like that, it's not frowned upon, and I don't think it should be at all. I think it's a great thing if you're trying to better yourself and feel good, and you know, be successful throughout your day, and knowing in the morning I'm waking up and I got a good night's sleep. It's the little things that maybe we don't do. So I'm just kind of telling you guys a little bit of personal information just to kind of give you guys some hope, whether it be yourself or somebody you know, or your child, your sister, your brother, your parent, whatever. Yeah.
There's actually there's a Coptic mental health, a free Coptic mental health clinic in New Jersey that's ran by Abuna Lucas Stefanos, who was a psychiatrist previously and became a priest, and he actually practiced as a practicing psychiatrist. And he has a whole community, whole clinic filled with Coptic people. And I mean,
I'm actually going to try to get him as a speaker as well, but I know during this time he's super busy.
He's very busy.
Mm-hmm.
Very busy guy. I don't think he sleeps. But he's a very good advocate, and he's a very awesome speaker. He was part of our mental health symposium as well. And I did get another question about how long do you guys go to? I'm sorry.
We normally run till about 9 Central, so 10 your time.
Oh, okay. So we still have a little bit of time to discuss. Oh, so I had another question about, when do mental illnesses manifest in children and youth, and when's a good time to start talking to them about mental illness? So most actual diagnoses or most mental health disorders, so anxiety can be as early as 5, 6, kids, and especially when kids are moving around a lot when they're younger, when they move from place to place, they don't have stable homes, difficulties at home, blah blah blah, all these different things. It can definitely, you see anxiety in children. That's the most common thing probably you see in children, in addition, to like ADHD, things like that. Depression is seen, but most of the time treatment for kids is therapy initially. Obviously, unless it becomes more severe and usually will be in teenage years when it becomes more severe. More serious things like bipolar schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is more common in males about 18 to 25 and females 25 to 35. Is usually when the onset of development is, but it can happen earlier, it can happen later, but that's on average when it usually happens. So most of these things happen earlier on in life. Anxiety can worsen obviously during college, teenage years, college. Depression, same thing. And it's something you can, it's not about you have to address it with children. It's about making it an open topic that and making the church a safe place for people to come discuss these things. Because just as Sarah was saying, you know, sometimes we're just so caught up in, you know, making fun of these kind of things or the stigma that we don't make the church a safe place for people to come to get help. And I'm sorry to say that. It's just sometimes that's a big problem that we have in churches, is that we don't make it a safe place for people, especially like people who are addicted to something. You know, people have addiction problems. People have problems with whatever problem they want to have. Sometimes we don't make it a safe place. And when we see someone who, you know, when we see somebody who is struggling, sometimes we even turn, you know, our cheek a little bit because it's stressful. You know, when someone's coming to tell you I'm suicidal, blah, 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 I'm depressed, sometimes we're just like kind of take a step back and move away. And I'm not saying everybody, but sometimes this is why people get that feeling. And I've heard it from a lot of different, you know, people struggling, is that they don't feel comfortable talking about it because they don't feel safe talking about it. So I think it's important to make it something that's, you know, it's important to talk about, especially with high school kids, especially is an important age, because that's the time when they're really starting to go through the development, and they're going through a lot of difficult times. Being a high school nowadays is like the most ridiculous thing ever. The things I hear, and like with Facebook and all this Instagram and everything, it's like it's a very serious thing that should, especially in high school. I mean, you could do it earlier, but high school is definitely where I would probably start, making it something open to talk about and easy to talk about. You know, making it something comfortable to talk about, and not, you know, making the church and making the Sunday school room or the, you know, the church servants, making it safe to talk about these things without a judgment of, well, you just, you know, God hates you and you're going, you know, whatever. So, you know, I hope that answers that question.
I really want to mention something, because what you brought in as far as making it comfortable, there's quite a few of us here on this call that are servants, and our initial reaction tends to be, well, maybe you're not reading in your Bible, maybe you're not spending time, quiet time, maybe you're not participating in the sacraments, maybe. And a lot of times we tend to forget that it is possible that this individual suffered from something that's buried in the subconscious that is surfacing out that way in the reaction of anxiety or whatever. So I want us to be very careful, like Andrew was saying, to make a comfortable room for people to talk without immediately saying that, you know, maybe you're not doing this or that. But we need to be aware that maybe this person actually really needs help.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because, you know, when you tell them, like, maybe it's because you don't do this, do that, you're actually making it worse for them. And that's because when they hear that, then they come to me, and then I hear that, and then I get upset, because you're making them feel even more guilty that they don't have a good relationship with God. So yes, those are things that may need to be addressed, but not at that moment. At that moment, they just need to feel safe in talking about it, because what's going to happen is they're going to be like, you're right, you know, and then that blaming, and that, you know, you're making them feel even more guilty about something that they're already embarrassed about and they're already struggling with.
And sometimes it wasn't even there, like it was something completely outside of their control, something that happened to them when they were young and they're not really mentally aware of it. It could have been abusiveness, it could have been mistreatment, it could have been bullying, but they buried it and just went about their lives. But sometimes these things surface out and bite at the wrong time.
Right. And then they get scared about talking about it, and they won't talk about it again with you.
Right.
Yeah, it's very important to make it a safe place and a safe environment for people to talk about, for people to understand that this is something that other people feel. Because the other thing is, you don't know what's going on in that person's life. That person could have been abused. You know, our church is not, our faith and our wisdom and everything about our church is beautiful, and it's perfect. But the people in it are not perfect, you know, and the servants, the people, the clergy, they're not perfect. The church in itself, the sacraments and everything, the faith, that's perfect. But our servants and our church and our people that represent it are not as perfect. So there are a lot of bad things that do happen, and you don't know about some of these things, you know, and you don't know what's going on in that person's life. You don't know what happened to them maybe when they were younger, if they were, you know, hit or whatever, you know, like you don't know the circumstances that they've dealt with. So again, making it a safe place for people to talk about things and not kind of just putting all this guilt on them that they already feel from the feelings that they have is very important. And I think that's the biggest thing that we need to work on collectively as a church, you know, and as a Coptic community. Not to say that there are churches that do that. I'm not saying everybody, but as a whole, this is what I notice, is that people don't feel safe or talking about a lot of these things. I got another question. How can we be a friend to someone who's expressing their anxiety to you? Like, how should you respond if they're seeking comfort? Most of the time, people are not coming to you for advice. They're just coming to really just have someone listen to them and to be heard. A lot of times people are just coming because they just need to like get it out of their system. And you can offer, I mean, you can think about all the time someone came and asked me for advice and how many times did they actually listen to you. Most of the time, they just want you to listen and just to be there and just know that they have someone there to catch me if I fall. Like having somebody, you know, that just will listen to me and understand where I'm coming from and you know, just hear me and so I don't feel that I'm crazy and I'm losing it. So most of the time, they just want someone to listen to them. You know, sometimes if it becomes too much, then that's when you start getting, you know, someone else involved. Like, okay, look, it seems like this is
Does anybody else not hear him?
Yeah, he lost the connection, I think, again.
Oh, okay.
You might want to suggest for him to turn off his video. Maybe that's part of the problem. His data's maybe too low.
I think we're getting close to the end. Dina, is there anything else you wanted to share? I think earlier.
I've given up on my computer. I'm just going to use my phone. I've given up. I've given up on the computer. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry. I'm done with the computer. Okay. What were we talking about? Oh, just making it a safe environment. Oh, dealing with someone who's coming to seek out help for anxiety. So, yeah. So most of the time, like I said, people are just looking for someone to listen. They just want someone to hear them so that they feel heard and that they can kind of go back. You know, they can, you know, talk about what they're feeling. But if it gets to the point where it's overwhelming for you, then, you kind of have to just point them in the right direction. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's getting to a point where you might need to talk to somebody, maybe just talk to like a counselor or a therapist or something. If it's becoming consistently every day, all the time, that kind of thing. But if it's just somebody, most of the time people are just looking for someone to hear them and they want to be heard. Most of the time they don't want you to really advise them. They just want you to just listen. Most of the time people just want you to listen. So I think it's just important to be there for them. You don't have to offer advice because they're going to do things 100 times and they're not going to listen to you, but they're still going to keep coming back to you because they just, again, want to be heard. And if it becomes too much for you to handle, then it's always okay to tell them, like, look, it might be a good idea to get some help, but be supportive until they get that help. Was there any more questions?
Andrew, you shared your email address with Ray, correct?
Yeah, it was on my slide. Sorry, I can share. I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, if you want to put it in the chat, or Ray, if you want to just put it in, send it out to group me if you have it.
Sure, no problem. I can post his email.
Yep. And then I've recorded this, so basically whoever is going to be watching it, they can see the.
I just posted my email in the chat, so anyone who wants to reach out, could always reach out to me.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
No, thank you guys, and I'm happy. Happy to help, and I hope I was beneficial in some way, and I hope you guys learn something.
Absolutely. This was one of many discussions, and I hope you can visit us again in the future. But mental health is really an important thing, and it is something that is not spoken, taboo somewhat in the Egyptian culture. And it's something that we need to have and need to develop within our own church, of having some openness and people not judging others, and having that safety net where they can come to and be heard and not be judged. So I think we need to figure out how do we develop our youth, and it's probably working with them when at a young age to change that mental or to change that type of culture that we have. So I do look forward to more sessions if you're available, and we do thank you for your time. And this was great.
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, you guys have my email if you need anything. And I'm humbled that you guys even asked me to come. There's a lot of better speakers out there, so I'm humbled that you guys asked. And I hope, like I said, that God provided for you guys something through me. And I hope we all stay safe and get through this crazy time that we're in.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We really appreciate it. Before everybody logs off, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. We still need about 10 volunteers for this Saturday for the Operation Back to School event in 6 Stones, which is in Bedford, I believe. If anybody is interested in volunteering, it's going to be like a drive-by event where we give out school supplies, back to school stuff to families in need. Most of them are part of our own Coptic community, outsiders as well. And we really need volunteers, especially from our church, that speak at least minimal Arabic, that can speak to the parents that don't know, have limited English. So if anybody's interested, that's this Saturday from 8 to 1. You could privately message me and I'll provide you with the link. You could sign up. It should be a really nice event. I'm looking forward to it. So if anybody's free, please let me know.
Thank you, Sarah.
No problem.
Dina, Suzette, anything else you would like to add? Mike?
Just a quick announcement. We're going to have a private tour of the Sunday school building for the college and young adult beginning at 11:30. So I ask if anybody's interested to go ahead and register on stmarydfw.org. They'd like to have a head count, but we'll be there at 11:30. Shouldn't take too long, but we'll have a really good look at the third floor where we'll eventually be housed. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to get together, and people want to go out for lunch afterwards. That would be great.
That's 11:30 this Sunday?
This Sunday.
Okay.
Yes, if anybody would like to reach out to me as well, I've been kind of contacting people on the side to see. So just kind of gathering a list. Thanks, Mike, for reminding me.
All right. If there's nothing else, thank you, everyone. This was great. Again, Andrew, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.